Let me show you the top 5 worst countries to be born in. Number 5, Haiti. Imagine you were born in Haiti, a small country in the Caribbean right next to the Dominican Republic. But in reality, they are two completely different worlds, because Haiti today is one of the most collapsed societies in the Western Hemisphere. From the very start, the odds are stacked against you, because the state barely exists in everyday life. In the capital called Port-au-Prince, armed gangs control about 80% of the city, which means the police often cannot even reach people. Ambulances are afraid to drive, and schools simply shut down without explanation. If you get sick as a child, there is a high chance there will be no doctor, and even if there is one, there is often no medicine, electricity, or clean water. Around half of the population does not have access to clean drinking water, which means that diarrhea, cholera, and infections still kill children, diseases that hardly exist anymore in rich countries. Economically, Haiti is stuck in a bad cycle. More than 60% of people live in poverty, and many families survive day by day without a steady income. This means that children often have to start working early or drop out of school, because the alternative is hunger. When natural disasters hit, like the earthquake in 2010 or later hurricanes, the situation becomes even worse, because the country lacks strong buildings and proper emergency systems. So what would be a crisis in other countries becomes a national disaster here. Next up at number 4 is the country of Afghanistan, which is much worse. So imagine you were born in Afghanistan, a mountainous country in Central Asia that for more than 40 years has almost constantly been in war, invasion, or civil war. That means your childhood begins in a society where violence is something you actually have to plan your life around. Even though there is no longer full-scale war everywhere, the country is extremely poor and politically closed, especially after the Taliban took power. The economy has collapsed, banks barely work, and many families lost all their savings overnight. More than half of the population lives with food insecurity, which means they do not know if there will be food tomorrow. If you are a child, the risk of malnutrition is high, and that affects both your physical growth and your brain development. The healthcare system is weak, especially outside the cities, and many births happen without a doctor, which makes both infant and maternal death rates much higher than the global average. And if you are a girl, life becomes even more restricted, because access to school, work, and freedom of movement is heavily limited. At the same time, Afghanistan is extremely dependent on foreign aid, but political isolation makes it hard for enough help to reach the people. The next one at number 3 is South Sudan. Now imagine being born in South Sudan, the world's youngest country, which became independent in 2011, but almost immediately fell into civil war. That means there has never really been a functioning state to receive you. The country is rich in oil, but extremely poor in practice because the money disappears in conflict, corruption, and chaos. More than 70% of the population lives in extreme poverty, and for many people, life is only about finding enough food to survive the week. If you are born here, the risk of malnutrition is among the highest in the world, and many children grow up with chronic hunger, which weakens their immune system and makes even simple illnesses life-threatening. Health clinics are few, often far away, and lack both staff and equipment. At the same time, the country is regularly hit by massive floods, which destroy crops, force families to flee, and spread diseases, making an already fragile situation even more brutal. Security is also not something you can rely on. Local conflicts, armed groups, and a weak police force mean that violence can break out suddenly, and millions of people have been internally displaced or become refugees in neighboring countries. Schools in some places exist only on paper, and many children never learn to read or write. And the country at number 2 is Yemen. Try imagine being born in Yemen, a country on the Arabian Peninsula that should be in a strong strategic position along important trade routes, but instead has become one of the world's most devastating humanitarian disasters. From the very beginning, you live in the middle of a war that has been raging since 2015, and that has destroyed almost everything that resembles a normal society. Hospitals have been bombed or lack electricity, water systems only work occasionally, and many doctors work without pay because the state does not really function. The most brutal thing about Yemen is the hunger. Around 17 million people are in acute food insecurity, and several million children are malnourished, which means their bodies and brains do not develop normally. It is not just that they lack food, it is a permanent condition where children get thin arms, swollen stomachs, and in many cases, lifelong damage. At the same time, the country has had one of the worst cholera outbreaks in the world because clean water is so rare that people drink dirty water just to survive. If you grow up here, going to school is often a luxury, especially for girls, and many children have to start working at a young age or beg. Airstrikes and landmines mean that even walking to school or fetching water can be life-threatening. There is no safe future and almost no way out because Yemen is partially blocked from the outside. And now to the final country, North Korea. If you were born in North Korea in East Asia, you would live in one of the most closed and controlled countries in human history, and it's therefore the worst place to start your life. Even as a baby, you become part of a system where the state decides almost everything from what you are allowed to think, to where you can live, and what kind of education you can get. Food is a constant problem. North Korea has had repeated periods of famine, and even in good years, the rations are small and unstable. Many families survive on rice, corn, and wild plants, and children often grow up malnourished. There is no free trade like in normal countries, and the state distributes food based on loyalty and job, which means your family can be punished with less food if someone in your family is seen as politically suspicious. At the same time, your life is extremely monitored. From school, you are not taught to think critically. Instead, you are taught to worship the regime and the leader. You cannot freely choose your future because your social class, called songbun, determines your opportunities from birth. If you are born into the wrong family, you can be locked into low status for your entire life, no matter how smart or capable you are. The internet is almost non-existent for ordinary people. You cannot travel freely, and even small mistakes can lead to harsh punishment. The darkest part is that you do not even know how bad your situation is compared to the rest of the world because the state controls all information. You grow up in a country where escape is extremely dangerous, where freedom barely exists, and where the entire system is built to keep you small and obedient. Thank you so much for watching. Please comment down below which of these you think sound worse.